hold up. Let's do this.
Because they're
In 3, we are... Hey, everybody, this is Glenn at the H2O Studios, high above Public Square. We are on a Tuesday. April 27th, 2021. We're part of the Get Real podcast with Josh Kearney. Josh, which version are we doing today again?
Which version of what?
Of the podcast, of your podcast, Get Real podcast. Is this the 4th or 5th one? I can't remember.
This is the 4th episode, labeled 4.27.21.
All right. Well, I'll have to label that later because I haven't done that yet. So, and there I am, a little dark, of course. But again, last time we had technical issues where we couldn't get 2 cameras together. But now, and plus I have a new chair behind me because the other one has been falling apart. So we are ready to talk about what today, Josh Kearney?
Today we're going to talk about the destruction of the American family.
The destruction of the American family?
That's right, from the top down.
The 20th, the nuclear family?
That's right.
Okay, and how so? This sounds very political.
Oh, it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll get into it eventually here, I'm sure.
Okay, all right. So, all right, let me just tell you, because I'm the dumb one here, I try to be the straight guy because I think it's important to note that when you talk about hypnosis or what you do, you have to have a layman's approach to this. So, okay, you start off by saying the destruction of the American family. I can go on and on
and the
about
confusion
that.
and the confusion that it has created in the minds of Americans in general.
Okay. That's interesting. So, how do we even start? I mean, that would take weeks to talk about the destruction of the nuclear family.
Right. We could do a whole doctoral dissertation on this, and we're just going to have some fun with it. I bet you.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So, my first question is to you: is the year 2021? Right. We're still in COVID. We're getting out of COVID.
That's right.
Where is the family today, as opposed to where it was when you were a child?
Well, that I can't really make a huge commentary on, except for through the eyes of people that are in confusion.
Okay.
So what happens is the way that we're designed, that we know of,
Mm-hmm.
is that when a child is raised, that child should have a united front.
Okay.
So at least in front of the child, the adults should all be on the same page. It's very simple,
Yeah,
right? They all
sure.
have the same goals.
Mm-hmm.
And there should be accountability and forgiveness. And there should be a way to approach these things as a united front. And in some communities, you still have that. It's not nearly as prevalent as it was when you were growing up or when I was growing up. But even then, it was still in the process of what I believe was falling apart.
Okay. Interesting.
So that's what we're going to talk about today.
So-
I'm sure there's some current events that we could kind of spin
We
into
can talk
this.
about all types of stuff, including future guests that don't apply to today's program and so forth. But in addition to that, it seems as if like for instance, when I was raised, we didn't necessarily eat at the dining room table like they did back in the Leave It to Beaver days. But that was the approach to the American family. You eat together, you watch the Beatles together, you watch Ed Sullivan together, and that changed in the 80s and 90s. And we had one car per family, and then we had 5 cars per family. You couldn't find a parking spot in Woodhaven, Queens. So that's when things changed for me. Am I correct on that, or is that
Well,
a lot
I'm
more
going
elaborate
to be
than
speculating here. All I know is what the result of it was, and I can throw some imaginative, creative responses out to you.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that when you don't have a united front, it causes disruption in the developing mind. We know this as a fact.
Interesting.
And that when you have 2 warring factions that are trying to lead the child to one thing or another, it causes a severe or mild, but mostly just a medium effect of selfishness, right?
True. Very true.
That somebody that has licensure may or may not, but may call sociopathy, and making decisions based on only on how things will affect that person, and eventually that adult. And it causes confusion, right? Because at our heart, we do want to love and be loved. And at our core, we do want to have things happen that are good for other people. And that's what successful people do. And that's why people that want to be successful watch our podcast, because we want all of you to be successful too.
Sure. Okay, so is this kind of like a footnote to those who haven't been raised wisely, if you will?
Well, at this point in time, it's more off almost... Never do we have people that I come in contact with that were raised with a united front. So
Interesting.
it's sort of like an explanation and kind of a beginning, precursor to the change that you want to make, knowing where you're at right now. And that, while this isn't a judgment on your character, it is kind of a commentary on the character you show when you are making decisions and you're communicating with people.
Right. All right. So we get back to what Hillary Clinton said. A village raises a child. A generation that lives in my generation or prior had a different way of life, different exposure to things. So in the latter part of the 20th century, things changed, and that's why we're all screwed up. Is that right?
I don't like being political at all, but I'm going to tell you what. She's a devout follower of Saul Alinsky, who was a communist.
Yes.
So anything she writes is bullshit.
Right. I
and
agree.
It's un-American. So when she says a village raises a child, she's setting a standard where we live in a nanny state where all parents are the people that pay the rent for the kids, and the school system and the political system raise the child to their standards. And that's BS too. That's not healthy in any way. And that's why we have civilizations collapse very quickly when they dissolve into things that people would describe as communism and socialism. Because that's not how the human nature works. So they can try all they want to make drones, and they've actually done a pretty good job in China. I'm close personal family friends with a couple people that are very successful that are from China, and they've been fully indoctrinated. Because remember when, as it was said, as you would read, that Mao wiped out the dissenters early, so just the standards were set for people to be born into that system in China. So that's what would have to happen in that situation. But it takes a village is BS. It's just commie BS. It doesn't work for anybody, and it's not the way to treat people.
But it's her way of saying, we all group together to raise a child as opposed to the nuclear family. And I think to some degree, not to defend Hillary Clinton, I'll be the last person to do that. Isn't she also saying that it's the onus of the parents also to incorporate a better lifestyle or a better upbringing for children plus the village? Or am I reading it wrong?
I'm going to tell you that she might want to cloak it in that, but it's honestly just a precursor to her being paid handsomely to force a certain communitarianism type of lifestyle in everybody.
All right, so this is fascinating and I'll tell you why this is fascinating. Again, in previous episodes, perhaps the last one, I'm thinking hypnosis is the pocket watch, the tunnel. I got to lose weight. I got to stop smoking. I got to stop smoking crack. I have an
I don't deal
addiction
with crack smokers.
I got an addiction to pornography, which I think is probably rampant.
I do that sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Probably for your. No, just kidding. That's the thing. But here's the thing. I am being educated by Josh Kearney, because it's a lot more than that. And I keep on saying, you sound like you're in psychology. You sound like a therapist, and yet you're not.
No, not in any way. So it's just following patterns of behavior where it came from and where people are going to go. And if you're 2 or 3 steps in front of people, like for instance, yesterday I had somebody come in, and it gets to the point that we were talking about reading and really caring about people the last couple of weeks. And when that's an automatic, I had come back from a medical center where I was visiting a former client to see how they were doing, and they actually called me and asked me to meet them over there.
Okay.
It's not far away from my office in East Syracuse. So also, because I'm changing time zones, sometimes my calendar gets mixed around by an hour or two.
Sure,
right?
sure.
Here or there.
Going back and forth to Kansas City.
So I was 10 minutes late, and when these people were waiting for me, I looked into their faces and I realized that it was going to be more work than I was qualified to do to help them out.
Okay, right? And just real quick,
Immediately.
how did you know is that reading the room right when you? How,
it was
how
reading
did you do that?
the hallway at that point.
Interesting.
So just the way they responded.
Were they upset with you because you were 10 minutes late?
Well, that would be understandable because that's not acceptable. But at the same time, actual adults, if they have a problem, will shake that off as soon as it's responded to.
Sure.
And be able to move into a normal conversation.
Right.
About
They'll
exactly
move on
what they
from
need.
there.
Because regardless of that, they are still asking, whether it was myself or one of the hypnotists there, they're still asking for some type of help.
Right.
And that's the key. Mm-hmm. If she was in as bad a shape as she was talking about with her and her husband, she needed more help than I could give.
Really?
And I knew that almost instantly. As she spoke to me about what her problem was, and her speech was a little delayed, and she was on an enormous amount of medication. So I knew in those moments,
right.
I knew that that I was going to need somebody who's licensed to help.
Really? Okay. Can you share? I know you're not at liberty, of course, to talk about, but we're talking about it now. Can you share what type of problems this?
It was a pain management issue.
Okay. All right. So she back pain or
multiple?
Okay.
Multiple
all right. Got
things.
it. All right. Good.
So, by the way that they responded and the way that the husband was involved in the conversation, I didn't even think it was her initiative to be there. Mm-hmm. So, I only can work with volunteers.
Right.
I can't make people do anything. So all these things combined, as I speak about it, I wasn't thinking about it probably consciously in the moment, but I knew something was amiss.
Right.
I knew something wasn't right. And I try to make it as easy as possible for them to transition into a referral who I trusted very, very much.
I'm sure you do, or you wouldn't have done it.
So she's also licensed. So I probably refer a couple people a month to this woman.
I'm sure you do.
Now she's also a trained. This is the reason I can refer her. She's got multiple licensures as a nurse and LCSW, but she's also a hypnotist. So if hypnosis was appropriate, she could be able to use it very easily.
Wow.
But what happened was she didn't take them either. So maybe there's something else going on there that wasn't in my wheelhouse.
Right. Sure.
But I do know that this morning I woke up to an email that was like a nasty gram from the husband that was about 2 pages long about everything that was wrong with me.
Wow. All right. Can you share that?
I can. You want me to read it to you?
By all means.
No, I'm not going to read it to you.
Why not? No, he's not going to read it, and I don't blame you. Okay, so just real quick here. You got someone, you got a referral.
Constructive criticism. It was.
Somehow or other, you're at fault for referring his wife to somebody else. That didn't work out, so he comes back to you. Am I reading that right?
He didn't like the way I wore my mask.
Okay, all right.
And
so
he didn't like the fact that I didn't shake hands, which I didn't have any hand sanitizer, so I wasn't going to do that.
Okay, and all right. Okay.
There's more there, but it's not.
Yeah. Okay.
But those things are mentioned.
So wait. Let me just before we go on. Maybe maybe her problem is her husband, or am I? You know,
I think they probably facilitate each other.
Yeah. Okay. Because at the end of the day, crazy people love each other's. Misery loves company.
Yeah, I can't qualify them as crazy.
Right. But
I do know when it's appropriate or not appropriate for people to be in the clinical setting that we have.
Right.
Because there are plenty of people that don't respond that way, that want to be there because they need help and they want to have a good time. And when it's not a dentist's office, not that there's anything wrong with dentist's office, but we're not pulling teeth or we're not making people bleed.
Right.
We're actually having a good time.
Right.
So
you're trying to get down to the root of their problem. You're trying to figure out why, in this case, she's got pain, or why anyone, for instance, has a vice like smoking or whichever. And
So,
in this case, she just doesn't seem to want to cooperate.
the reason why it wasn't a good fit was, again, what we opened the show with as we got to the second stage of what the issue is with being like people responding to the way they were raised.
Right.
And that is that they failed to see anything outside of themselves. So they couldn't see the fact or didn't want to hear the fact that I did just come from a client who was in bad shape, who was an extremely nice lady.
Right.
And that's why I went to see her. I helped her quit smoking, even in her later stages of life, right? So,
Interesting.
and a lot of the clients are so appreciative,
Yeah.
right? And they work so well with it. You do want to make sure that they know that you're there if they ever need you. So while all those mix-ups did happen, and I did apologize for them, it didn't seem to be enough, and it set it off to the point that all they could think about, and I mean, she's heavily medicated, so who knows what she was thinking about, to be honest with you.
Right,
I'm
sure.
not a pharmacist. I don't know what the effects of some of those drugs are.
Wait. No. Okay. So all right. So this, but again, we're talking about the root of the family issues.
So it became
particularly in the nuclear family. So.
Right. So this situation I'm describing became other people's problems and not their own perception of what was happening.
Okay.
So they couldn't step outside of themselves and see that there's other people that were existing in the moment, right?
Right.
They had to only see how things were happening to them. And that's a tough, for a hypnotist for this setting.
Right.
That's a tough ask, because no matter what happens, eventually it's going to come around. In this situation, what I could read, and this is why we talk about these things, because you want to be 2 or 3 or 4 steps ahead of any problem.
Right.
That no matter what happened, if something went sideways, that almost immediately they're going to start blaming, and they're going to blame somebody, and the easiest target would be somebody who's not a licensed doctor, and that's me.
Which is you.
It's me.
Yeah, so you're the scapegoat.
Me or Deborah or Cameron or any of the hypnotists that come in.
But last week you talked to Scott McFall, and he was talking about reading the situation or reading the room. So
with compassion,
with compassion. So relate that to this story, if you don't mind.
So while we were going through that, and I was actually modeling and watching them from different perspectives to see, where I could take them, the questions I could ask, how quickly they would be to jump on board, and maybe what the root cause of what they were going through. That's when it started to add up, that it was very, very quickly it added up that they didn't really qualify to be there. And also they did mention that they wished I had sent the paperwork ahead of the time. But the thing is that all these things are in order for a reason, and it all leads to change, like every single step of the way. And the more people want to acquiesce to each step of the process, the faster they get beyond what they expected. So trusting the process is, again, something that is up in the air when, like, for instance, I was talking about how people can only see things from their own perspective, and that's what happens when you've got two warring factions raising kids. And remember, there's this huge divorce problem. I think when did it start? I don't know. Honestly, if everybody wants to know the true statistic, and I read this long ago as a journalism major, the highest divorce rate in American history was 1946.
Wow.
Just so everyone knows, right? And of course, there's so many guys coming home from the war.
Right, of course, that makes sense, sure.
Yeah, they were just in ridiculous shape. They sacrificed so much, including their own sanity sometimes. So, but when...
Not to mention
it almost
lives
seemed
and legs
like
and limb.
it was sold to us. The way I'm going to say this, Glenn, is it seemed like divorce was sold to us as a viable option.
Right.
And something that was normal. And I don't know, it was happening in the 80s. I know, but my parents were divorced, right? And then when both sides wanted to be active in molding the way that the child went, or wanted to be right, and there's still friction between the other former spouse, that's when you're going to get those two different sources of authority, and that's when you're going to get pulled. A person's going to get pulled in either direction and not know what the difference. A lot of the times, in what would affect them well, and what would affect others well, and would affect everybody well. So that's the first step in all of this. The first step in this conversation. Now, we were supposed to have a guest, and we will have this guest on. She will be on. And she's going to be an amazing interview, right? Because of what she went through. And I'm not going to divulge her story, but she has some things to talk about that you wouldn't expect.
I can imagine.
And I think are fascinating things, especially when we talk about human behavior.
Sure.
So there's a third step in all this, and that's what I think we're going through in the last, I don't know. I'm just guessing here. Like, I can't be taken to task with these numbers. I can't give you an exact number, but it's become more and more prevalent as I notice it getting older and older, and that is multiple sources of authority. That's the school system, the grandparents, the mom and the dad.
Stepdad. I mean,
but they're not on the same page. They all have their own priorities, right?
Yeah, right.
So this is where kids don't know the difference between right and wrong.
Interesting.
And their value systems are completely misaligned.
Right.
So they're in confusion.
Right.
Constantly, right? And they have no relevancy filter, relevant to what's right and what's wrong.
Right.
And this is tough, you know? And a lot of people know that I coached basketball for many years.
Yeah.
And I only coached kids from the city. That's where we lived. I live in the inner city, and the kids are from the inner city, and all different backgrounds, right?
Right.
And, I mean, I broke it down to, it was a team you had to pay to be on, which helped.
Right, sure.
So there's no just volunteers.
Yeah,
like they had to be volunteers. Like, their parents couldn't just sign them up because I wouldn't take them. And the tryout process was a little different because of the background I have in all this behavior. In the end, there was a few problems in not wanting to follow instructions, but there are only a few.
Okay.
Because we played the game one practice of stand up and sit down, and that was right before cuts. And the kids that didn't stand up and sit down, when I told them to stand up and sit down, half an hour in, just didn't play on the basketball team.
Right, because if they couldn't get that, if you can't get that down, then you're probably you probably don't want to be there to begin with.
It's that simple. You just want to follow instructions, because there's no such thing as following instructions really with the right set of goals in mind and outcome, and being harmed. I mean, you might not be comfortable the whole time. You might be frustrated, but that's not harm.
Right. All right. So this is interesting. So let me just step back here. Because I'm fascinated with history. I'm fascinated.
I hope this is a fun topic. I think it was kind of neat.
It's a tremendous topic because it's the root of what's going on out in the world, particularly when you're talking about adults who were children in the latter part of the 20th century, where divorce rates were not as high as 1946, by the way. I didn't know that. But obviously things changed. School became their nannies. The college became their nannies, and media. And now today, with social media telling people, you've been oppressed all your life, you can get away with it, you can get out of jail for beating up somebody.
Your opinion is super important.
Your opinion at 12. We want you to vote at age 16. We want you to come up with your orientation at age 3. All these things are filtered into people whose minds aren't even there yet, so they think they're in control. Like a lot of people at that age, they think this is their world, not yours. So therefore, if you come up with a reason why they're screwed, you don't know what you're talking about. We've always had generational gaps. I get that. I've been part of that. But the lack of respect for authority is killing us at this point.
Well, you can't blame them either. I mean, it's a horrible thing. But at the same time, if they're being told, if a bunch of people are taking opinion as fact and then trying to force it on other folks, right? That's crazy. And then, of course, the kids, after a few years, are going to be like, you guys, first of all, you contradict each other. Second of all, none of the things you're saying is working.
Right.
So that's where you have a lack of relevancy. Mm-hmm. And it's a tough thing to overcome. And the reason why I want to talk about the Kardashians is because we got to see it play out in real time over the course of about 10 years.
At least,
right?
no, more than that. Yeah, it's more than that. They've been
Well,
on 14 years.
The meat of it, I mean.
Yeah, sure.
You got an evolution of 10 years.
Right.
And that's what I wanted to go over today. And if people are watching and I'm missing some of the details and you can chime in and kind of support some of these things that I'm saying, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
But this is one of my favorite conversations. I love to have these conversations when I'm around a bunch of other people in our profession.
About the Kardashians.
Yes, because I will, state something that's controversial in the fact that the TV show, the documented TV show, as we've seen it and edited of the lives of the Kardashians, as we perceive the Kardashians,
a reality show,
the perfect American family,
right? Not even close.
Is a perfect representation of what the American family has gone through in the last few
generations.
Decades. Yeah, generation.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
And I love them, and I love them more than I should.
Okay.
And I'll watch them. I swear, I don't have TV at home, but if I'm in a hotel room out of town and I don't have anything else to do and I'm just blowing off some steam and relaxing and they come on, you're going to have to pry me out of the bed.
All right. I got to interrupt. Why is that? Because let me just say, you're enamored with wealth, with lifestyle, with beautiful women, with their choices in
all of them.
Men that cheat on them. Okay, why?
So
explain.
on the surface, the frosting, the wrapping here,
right.
You do have people that were literally bred to be attractive, to be ambiguous, racially ambiguous and attractive and American, right? And to kind of support the goal of glamour and excess and things that were kind of thrust upon us as certain aspects of the community, as certain aspects of the media wanted us to be guilted into being successful with things. So this is what we're supposed to be.
Right.
Remember that.
We're supposed to be the Kardashians.
Right. We are supposed to be the Kardashians, even if you go home and you kiss your kid on the head and nobody sees it.
Right.
Even if you have 1 month where you sweat out the bills and the next month you have a windfall and everyone in the family is happy, but you just keep going. When you go to work, when there's hectic things going on around you, just like you go to work when there's and you make a living when there's nothing hectic going on around you.
Right.
The things that we're built on have been bastardized and fed back to us like they're bad.
Yeah.
Right. So that's just on the surface.
Right.
It's just fascinating to me, right?
Right.
So we're supposed to be these over-consuming, glamorous, hyper-wealthy people. Now, that's not to mention that, I mean, if they are truly those people, because we'll never know.
Right.
I don't think I'll ever meet one of them. I'll never be intimate with intimately know one of them.
I think they're being canceled, if I'm not mistaken, but that's neither here nor there.
They could be canceled 10 times over and still be fine.
Right.
Oh, from what we know, again, remember, this is what we perceive because they're just figures on a television, right? I do believe they exist because I remember seeing Kris Jenner in the courtroom during the OJ trial.
Yeah, do you really? I don't remember seeing. Of course, I remember Rob Kardashian, who died of esophageal cancer. By the way, he was the one that looked back at OJ when he was acquitted. So I remember him from that, but not them.
Oh, she was dating. I mean, she was with both of them. So.
Yeah, well,
she was separated from Rob, and she was dating.
Apparently,
OJ.
Is it rumored that Khloe might have been OJ's daughter? I mean, people were saying.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah,
but that's a great rumor. But Kris Jenner, from what she's been presented, I've heard from other people too, especially business coaches and life coaches and people in our industry, that she's an incredibly shrewd businesswoman.
She is. She has to be.
Incredibly shrewd.
Look what she's done.
So that aside, this is my take on the great American family. If things played out even better, we'd have a Kardashian in the White House. That's the only way it could get better. And I thought years ago that they were going to push Palin and Mike Tyson into the White House.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, just as we say this, just a couple of days ago, Caitlyn Jenner, otherwise known as, who was referred to as Bruce Jenner for many years, including the 1976 Olympics out of Montreal, where
and the
he
Wheaties,
was and the Wheaties commercials and so forth, was a very, I mean, I'm going to say the word, he was beautiful. He was a beautiful man. He's not the most beautiful woman in the world, but I respect him, particularly the fact that he's going to be running as governor. So what you're saying is it's a possibility that to some degree the Kardashians will be in the White House if he wins.
Maybe. So the thing about
Reagan did
about Bruce Caitlyn is that I know this is
Bruce Caitlyn.
This seems quirky, but
yeah, no one's
heard a word. No,
yeah, it's ghosts.
It is ghosts.
Yeah.
The reason why I don't trust his intentions is because he holds his mouth funny.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Not only that, he still has his his appendage, but that's not it.
well,
That makes
that's,
him.
again, that's also a rumor.
By the way, no, it's not a rumor because I saw it on the View the other day. Or
You
someone
saw
said-
you saw
Actually, no, I saw it on the
Bruce's penis?
I didn't see Bruce's penis, but someone referred to Bruce as not only is transgender, but he's a lesbian.
Excellent.
Yeah, so well, think about it. He's a woman
tough
that
gig.
likes other women, and he still has, he's got the best of both worlds there. It's, hey, I dress as a woman, and look what I got down here. We're
I
gonna have
never
a lot of
thought
fun.
that you would say that a transsexual was the best of both worlds.
Well, I mean, in his case, it is because he
joking
still
with
kept. Look, most and did I? Never mind. We won't get into that statistic about those who really who go suicidal after they make that commitment and so forth. But that's for another show. All right, so go on. I'm sorry.
So you're looking at the difference between accountability, right? Mm-hmm. Empathy,
Yeah. Right.
right, and forgiveness.
Right.
The second thing we talked about was people that only filter things through themselves because of the way that they grew up confused, they developed confused. And the third is so many authority figures that there's a lack of relevancy.
Okay.
Now remember, those folks are very easy to manipulate as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here we are in the evolution of the Kardashians. All right, and here I'm gonna put this out on the plate now. I'd love to have people talk more about it,
Sure.
right? And I'd love to have you ask me as many questions as possible. But we're looking at, we open up in 2008 with a family that's fun-loving, right? And they have 3 sisters. Obviously, one of them is sort of like the ugly duckling. They have a fun-loving teenage boy.
But wait, let me just stop. They're all gorgeous. They're just
Well,
not
one of
as
them wasn't at that time.
Just not as pretty as Kim. I guess Kim was the.
Well, I think Courtney's way prettier than Kim, but that's okay.
Okay. All right. Well,
So naturally, this is
yeah.
before then, and we got to see them vulnerable. So we got to see them in a position where a lot of times they didn't have any makeup on. It was before Chloe had a lot of plastic surgery to catch up to her sisters,
Right.
and now I think they've overdone it even.
Yeah,
Chris looked great.
Right.
Bruce was there. They had 2 little ones, right? And-
Scott. You had Scott.
Well, yeah, Scott. I'm going to get to Scott in a second, but Scott was adopted into the family
Right.
because of his relationship with Courtney.
Courtney. Yeah.
And
Who was in my opinion, was the most mature because she had children first and she dealt with Scott all the time. But go ahead.
So here's my point, though. It all came down to the fact that Rob was there too, and Rob was
Right.
finding out who he was. And he's
Yeah.
trying to find himself through the fact that he had these hyper attractive, hyper successful sisters
Yeah,
and
right,
mom.
right.
And he wanted an identity,
Sure.
right? And then you had Bruce there. You
Right.
had Bruce Jenner was there, right?
Right.
So
Which is why, in my opinion, which is one of the reasons why he always wanted to be a woman, apparently, because he dressed up years before the reality show was a reality show. But when that show came on, he saw all this attention given to all these women. He said, boy, if you're a gorgeous woman in high heels and long legs, you get a lot of attention. Just a theory. Just a theory. Go ahead.
I
Sorry.
haven't thought about that, but here's what we saw in the long and short of it, right? And Scott was there as well.
Right.
Now, as Bruce started to become more and more confused openly, right? It started from when he bought a new car for a certain reason because he wanted the guys to like him.
Right.
And then started getting earrings and things like that. And
Right.
it went all the way, as you know now, it went all the whole
It went all the way.
full
Yeah.
way. Right?
Yeah. Then he got into a car accident that no one sees. to talk about.
Unconsciously, all
Right.
the other pieces of the family started acting out more and more each day, every day, as he was less and less reliable
Right.
in his role
Right.
as the father figure.
Yes. Yes.
This is my point.
It was a matriarch family for sure.
Well, the thing is, and Chris didn't want it that way either. You could tell because she started to wig out too. She started to lose it a little bit too. Now think about the fact that before we go forward with this, these people also sold themselves out. So all these things had to play out on national TV.
Right.
And I'm guessing if the executive producer, who's Ryan Seacrest or one of these other
Yeah,
folks,
right,
he doesn't seem malicious at all to me.
No, nice guy.
But
Overexposed, but nice.
somebody there realized this was going to happen or could facilitate this, and it was the model for what our country went through with the family in the coming years. More and more each day, every day. And this is what I want people to see as an example and realize you're not, just because you've gone through this, if you have one of the worst upbringings in the world,
Right.
or what you think is chaotic, right, or things that think they're tough. Remember, frustration is actually good. Frustration is a term that has been taken as a negative, but it's actually a marker, let's say, a compass towards, if you walk through frustration, that's how you get what you want. If you say you want X, Y, or Z, you're going to be confronted with frustration repeatedly until you go through it, until you walk through it. So the obstacle is always the way you want to go when you want success. So that's not to say that nothing can happen and we're all screwed, but this is when people moved in the path of least resistance because of comfort and because of wealth and because of cameras and because of status and popularity.
Right.
So the first thing that we saw was Rob getting nervous. The second thing I saw was Scott Disick acting out and leaving Courtney, and he had an admitted alcohol problem, which a lot of people have gone through, which is not a big deal.
Well, he was hanging out with Humphrey and then Lamar Odom, and he was with some.
That's besides the point. What happened? That's not yet. That's the next
Okay,
chapter.
gotcha. Sorry.
So, but he started to act out. If you watch the first couple of seasons, he started losing his mind, and when he finally detached from the family, is when he found his center again. Now, Rob didn't. As he went through the years, if we start with Rob, what he did was he became morbidly obese. He isolated himself.
Right.
He got thin again because he was pressured by his mom, and then got obese again. And then whenever he was on the cusp of having a real relationship, he would go off and do something crazy, which, like when he knocked up a porn star or an Instagram model or whatever, with a sex worker, right?
Right.
And then even that fell apart. Even that wasn't worked on.
Yeah, what a surprise.
So you saw these men now, these young men without a model, and they dissolved into chaos, right? And what are they going to look at Kris Jenner as a male figure? I mean, she went into the fact that she started having relationships with guys that were 20 or 30 years younger than her, probably because she didn't want to challenge. And I'm just speculating there.
Right.
But I mean, it's easy to see why she wouldn't want to challenge.
she
or
looked
wouldn't want to
great,
go through the same thing. And she did look great. She
Yeah.
still looks great.
She still looks great.
So, I mean, we're watching these people dissolve into chaos. And this is the way the American family moves, and what is possible if steps aren't taken if you take away the male authority figure. This is what is possible when you take the father out of the existence. And we're not just saying the mother's marginalized, because she's actually more important in many ways than the father. We're not talking about mom today.
Right.
We're talking about the father being taken out, destroyed, marginalized, and how it affects the rest of the family. So we've only talked about the boys so far. We're talking about Disick leaving, Rob going crazy and leaving. I mean, anytime you're a young man and you just go into excess and become morbidly obese when you're as popular as him, I mean, could you imagine if he went the other way? Can you imagine if he was Arnold Schwarzenegger's kid?
Right.
I mean, he'd be ripped, and he'd be probably a news anchor on Fox or something, right? Or
Well,
something super popular.
It's funny you say that,
producer.
because Arnold Schwarzenegger does have at least two sons, and both look very good at this point. You're right.
Well, the one that was raised by his mom was
Maria Shriver.
He was about 210 pounds of chewed bubblegum until his dad got a hold of him. But the son that he raised, it was ripped since he was 14.
Right, of course. Because, and his physique is obviously part of his DNA as well. But here's something. Let's go back to history.
Okay.
The Great Society, LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson. Up until that point, the family unit, particularly those in urban America, and it wasn't even referred to urban America back in the 60s, the father figure in the black community, for instance, I'm just using this as a backdrop because we've been talking about the Kardashians. Obviously, you were using that as an example, which is good. The more modern day. But we're going back 60 years, where up until that point, the father was more prevalent, a lot more prevalent, and then all of a sudden, welfare got more handouts, more food stamps, more incentives to stay home, to be given money by the federal government and whatnot. So the Great Society was the beginning of the end, and the beginning of what you and I are talking about right now, the desecration of the nuclear family.
I would agree that it doesn't take much.
Right. Well, father is a huge part of your life.
But it doesn't take much. We went thousands and thousands of years with people in that place, right? So it's a natural place, a natural state to be that quiet, strong authority that perceives things more than acts, and is always there to be as a backbone of the family. That's an easy thing to be. I mean, people don't realize it's not difficult, and it's hard to do it wrong as long as you're doing it. There's actually no such thing as doing it wrong, and you don't ever do anything perfect. That's not the point. The point is that as long as you're there, that's more important than anything else.
I totally agree.
So I want to talk more about the girls now.
Totally agree. Okay, now we're for the record, I thought we were talking about the girls, but go ahead.
So now we're into the girls. Now we're into Kim. Right. And there's one thing that stands out to me about Kim before Kanye, and I think Kanye is incredibly talented. So
wow,
I think he's an amazing guy. I think also he's a whack job, but so is Picasso, right?
Yeah,
so,
so is Musk.
Right? And he's not present, and he's really flimsy at that point. It might have been season 3 or 4. This is when he started getting the earrings, and the hair was weird, and all that kind of stuff. And he started getting the facial surgery, and his lips started getting weird.
Right.
But he's among a bunch of guys, and she is melting down.
Yeah.
And in response to that, everybody piles in on her like it's good TV, but she's really having a breakdown. And I thought that was tragic, right? And then if you move Kim from that, then she stopped being available on the show. So she went through a period of time where she did some weird things with her nieces and nephews. She would play weird games. This is right on camera, right? And she would say a lot of things that weren't consistent with her character. She would do a lot of strange stuff. Her behavior is just off. And then she stopped being available. And then she started marrying everyone in sight.
Yeah, right.
And then those marriages never
Basketball,
worked out.
football.
That didn't make any sense. It's almost like they're arranged marriages. She was like, what the hell am I doing here?
Right.
And she wasn't available in those marriages either. And I'm guessing she's probably not very available to her current marriage. And I don't know. Or I think
They're getting a divorce. Yeah.
So I don't know how.
But
that
at least
worked
it
out.
lasted a lot longer.
I'm just speculating here. So I'm guessing it didn't. I mean, that was definitely a very successful marriage for them financially. So I don't know I'm not going to guess on that. But I'm telling you, she stopped being available. She stopped being vulnerable, and she kind of dissociated from the family, right? And then you have the multiple lives of Courtney, where she was in and out of relationships with Scott, and kind of not super present around her kids.
Right.
And then you have Chloe, who's an absolute train wreck, right?
Right.
So this all exacerbated itself season to season, year to year, as Bruce Jenner became Caitlyn, but he went downhill and was expressing more and more how he wasn't happy in his role as a guy.
Right.
So it's almost like he went in there with a social contract, like, I'm going to be the head of the family now because your dad's dead.
Right.
They all love him.
They do. Yeah, of course.
I mean, he had kids with their mom,
Right.
and he's been around since they were small.
Right.
And he didn't seem like early on a domineering guy, right? So he was actually playing the role until he wasn't. And then as he checked out, so did all of their sanity. Sanity's in quotes now. I'm not diagnosing anybody. So they all descended into madness.
Wow. This is
why I love the Kardashians.
This is good
I think
stuff,
it's
folks.
tragic, but I mean, of course, remember, they're benefiting handsomely from destroying their lives on TV.
well, yeah, but it's a lot of it. But no, again, I'm just going to be the devil's advocate here. Do you think a lot of this is playing up to the camera, and
No.
how genuine is it?
Now, tell me this, though.
Yeah.
This just popped in my head. If there are dads out there that are watching this, or people that are in leadership positions, which one of you, if there are any at all, would pimp their 16-year-old daughter out to a rapper, which is what happened with one of his kids.
Right.
But he wasn't there because he was too busy.
How do you say
gallivanting
pimp?
around in a dress?
What do you mean? What do you mean pimping? Like introducing them? I mean,
Right.
they introduce themselves to that
I
culture.
don't, now they're 15. I mean,
Oh,
there's had to
okay,
be
yeah,
somebody
you're
there
right.
that approved, and
You're
she brought the grown man that was her guy at the time
Right.
around at 15, 16 years old.
Right.
That's just not appropriate, especially if you knew the lifestyle that at least that gentleman, that person talked about having.
Right.
So, I mean, these are all things that don't happen when the dad is present, right? It doesn't mean you're supposed to come down and, I mean, in my opinion, when you enforce boundaries, it doesn't mean that you tell them that they have to do exactly what you say,
Right.
or else hit the bricks, right? It means
right.
that this is the standard, and this is why this is the standard. And when you make choices as an adult, remember, you should have standards too.
Sure.
That's it.
All right. So what we've been talking about, the whole aspect of this is the family unit and how it's changed over the years. And as a child growing up, you inherit all the things that you're accustomed to: selfishness, anthrocentric society, where it's me. You know, we talk about a 4-year-old saying, "Hey, mom, look what I'm doing." He said, "What? Oh, no, come in and look at me. It's all about me." Of course, the 70s generation was the beginning of the me generation, and it hasn't given up on itself. But then you said earlier, layer it with school teachers, with society, and then, of course, social media and everything on top of that. Kids are going blindly. And is this the reason why suicide rates have been so rampant in the last 20 years for kids between the ages of 16 and 20?
I don't know. I do know that it does cause a lot of confusion.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Sure.
I'm just thankful that, I mean, nothing we did was perfect in our family.
No.
My kids have been in and out of situations that were like completely stable, and then
Right, you never know.
questionable.
Yeah, right. God forbid.
But I mean, I think they've done well. I think
No, and they
I've
have
done well with my kids.
You
and-
have done well, and it's amazing because you're not for nothing, but Josh is kind of like a Brady Bunch scenario.
Yeah.
You have your children, Your beautiful wife has her children, and together. Now that in itself must.
And we
have
have a kid together too,
yeah,
which
and
is,
you have a
that's
kid together.
Really
so you
a point of contention with a lot of people.
Is it really? We'll get to that in a bit. But can we make a reality show of the Kearney family or what?
I mean, you could. It would be boring as all hell. It'd just be me bitching about how there's scooters in the driveway. That's it.
Why is there? And I don't want to use the word. What's the problem with the child that you share with the other kids?
Well, I mean, this is going to put an undue amount of pressure on all four of those kids.
How so?
It's going to change their identity in the eyes of myself and their mom and their stepmom. And
But they love your youngest and so forth. So right?
So remember, she and I both have oldists. We have eldest kids, right?
That's Hunter.
Oh no, that's Sophia. She's an adult now. She's 18.
Wow.
And also, my stepdaughter's name is Aurora, and she's 7. Mm-hmm. So both of them had to experience their parents by themselves as if there was nobody else.
Yeah, right. Must have been tough.
So it's difficult to add. Mm-hmm. So when you have more kids after that, those kids are just used to having other kids around. So like, what's the big deal?
Right. Right.
So, but it's a lot of chaos. It's a lot of expectation, a lot of sharing.
But like you said, as long as you're there, that's what's important. I mean, this layering.
As long as you set a standard.
Okay,
right?
so now, let's break it down. I mean, some of your kids are your father, and then their mother, who you're no longer with, and now they have a stepmother, and now they also have a stepbrother that's associated with you and her. So that's
a half brother.
A half brother. Yeah. Okay, sorry. So that does get confusing. Is that what we're talking about? Are kids more confused because of their upbringing, because of the new society?
So I would say it's more confusing because of the other folks that try to impose authority on their lives.
Okay.
That's where the confusion comes from. So we're not, again, exempt from that. Mm-hmm. And no matter what group you're in now, people think that opinion is actual fact. So I want to point something out that as they go to school, but the public school system has infiltrated, certain things have infiltrated math and science now.
Right.
And I'm talking about diversity training. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's absolutely obnoxious.
How so?
How do I think it's obnoxious?
Yeah,
Because
sure.
I want my son to learn about geology.
Oh,
if
without
it's a geology
a doubt.
class,
Yeah,
right?
the sciences, English.
Science and math is really, really important.
Right.
I mean, to an extent. I'm not saying that you could. I don't expect him to do if he's just not interested in calculus. I don't expect him. I want that to be available to him.
I totally agree.
But I don't want the fourth day of calculus, the Thursdays, to be training on how somehow he should feel guilty because 300 years ago, there's a class of people that was wrong.
Right.
It's nothing to do with him. He's only 15.
I so agree. I am so in accordance with what you're saying right now. It's absurd, but I'll take it a next step. Nobody likes going to the gym, but when you go to the gym, you get a healthier body. I didn't like trigonometry, but I knew at the end of the day it was making my mind stronger. Is that a good way of looking at it? Or
Yeah,
what?
when you push those, when you stretch yourself.
Even the things you hate the most.
I couldn't have stayed with trigonometry, and I had a problem, and I had problems in high school. I mean, I didn't even go really.
Really?
I mean, I still graduated. I remember like two examples.
What high school did you go to?
I went to Baldwinsville High School.
Oh, okay.
In central New York, and I remember I was a year ahead in science, and I had a great teacher. And I think he's passed now, from what I've been heard. I haven't heard from him in years. He was an old man when I knew him.
Right.
So I wouldn't go to lab. I hated going to lab. I thought it was slow and boring. And of course, I had the consequence of failing the class. Mm-hmm. I got a 96 on the Regents, and I got a 54 in the class because I got a 0 in labs.
Well, wait a minute. You must have been studying, because in order to do that well in the Regents, which I always thought was more difficult than the actual class. So why is it that you didn't go to class and yet you knew what?
Well, I didn't go to the labs.
You didn't go to the labs. Sorry.
So he was an amazing teacher. Mm-hmm. So I sparingly did homework, but I didn't really need to learn because he was just a great teacher. And the same thing happened in economics as a senior, which almost threatened my graduation. Was that I got a 98 in economics? It just clicked. It was simple math. Economics is simple when your emotions aren't involved with them. But I had 22 absences in that class.
Oh, okay. And that,
so he said that I wasn't going to pass. So
Wow.
what happened was the last night before,
It's like
the day before,
Mr. Hand. Go ahead.
it is like Mr. Hand. He just showed up at my house, right? No, what he did was after my parents complained,
Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Go ahead.
which after my parents complained, I still had to write a 4-page essay, but I only had one night to do it, so I had to stay up all night and write this essay on some topic. I don't remember what it was.
Wow.
But I didn't plagiarize. I honestly had a works cited list, and it was typed out, and he got it first thing in the morning, and I got to graduate.
Isn't that something? Wow. Who would ever think? Of course, if I skipped one class at Christ the King High School, I'd be taken out of the class forever.
I can imagine.
Oh my goodness.
So as it stands, we have these things happening right now, and it's important to know that first of all, you just got to let go of stress first. There's no reason to be super intense about these things because much like gravity and the sun rising, these things are going to exist around us in one machination or the other at all times. So it's easy when you're free of stress to focus on the outcome that you want. But it is also important to know how you're affecting other people in your role. Now, I'm not talking about the mother today, and I don't think that, I mean, I can talk about moms all day long, and moms are have all the leverage and all the relationships, and it's super important, and they have a lot more responsibility at times, like emotionally, with children and raising children, and that type of. I read this book, right? As a matter of fact, I think that on this page that you're probably watching this, if you're watching this on Wednesday night, I'm going to start some ASMR exercises so people can listen to my voice as they go to sleep and they become more comfortable with my voice and they can listen. There's a book that I love called "You Can't Win" by Jack Black. It's the best. This is literally the best book ever written in America, and it's not well publicized. William Burroughs cites it as his favorite book, and I think William Burroughs was a whack job, so that's not any credit to the book, right? Yeah. But it's an adventure story of someone who grew up in Missouri in the 19th century, in the 1800s, and he lost his mom at 10, so he was in boarding school, and then he was in public school, but school wasn't structured the way it is now. So eventually his father just asked him what he wanted to do, and he wanted to get a job. He wanted to make money, right? But his father had his own job, so his father was gone for weeks and months at a time. And he lived in a boarding house when he was 16. So eventually he didn't like the fact that his father was coming home telling him what to do, so he literally one day just walked out the door and didn't come back.
Wow.
And he hit the road. And it's a story about the adventure and the perils and the loss, but how he had regret when he was in the 1920s when he was a librarian, because if he had followed his mother's advice before she died, and B, if he had lived a straight life, he would have had a lot more to fall back on when he was in his 50s and 60s, and when he was actually a librarian for William Randolph Hearst in San Francisco.
Wow.
And
Which, of course, as people know, was the basis of the most famous movie of all time, Citizen Kane.
And also, they can try to bash this guy all they want, which is probably what Citizen Kane is, right?
Yeah.
Even though my favorite character is Orson Welles, probably in American history.
Oh, without it.
Right now.
As Kane? Yeah.
No, just as Orson Welles.
As Orson Welles, yeah.
So
he was quite the guy. He died almost broke, too. He had to borrow money from the actual Hearst family, which is ironic as hell. Go ahead, sorry.
So William Randolph Hearst was billed in this book as the last independent newspaper owner.
Wow.
So when the corporations got a hold of the information that we receive, they first went through newspaper, and he was the last holdout.
Really?
And then he was gone, and they trashed his name.
Huh.
So,
all right.
Anyway, so that's my story. If you can't win, is all about you can't win when you go off the beaten path. I mean, there's always creative choices you can make, but making a good life for yourself by a certain letter is the best possible way to go about it.
So are we going into I guess reverse engineering, if you will, when we go into someone's life through hypnosis? I mean, reverse engineering is what the Chinese do very well. They take something that they couldn't create themselves, and they just take it apart and they look at it and say, oh, okay, this is how you do this. Are you doing the same thing when you're looking at someone's life, when you realize you had a lot of layers, you were born in 1975, you went through a divorce, you had a stepdad, you left, you went hitchhiking at the age of 17 years old across the country, all these, again, I'm making this up. This is all hypothetical, of course. But are you doing that analysis when you're dealing with your clients?
It depends on the client. It depends on what their ask is, what their request is. But a lot of times, what I need to do is I need to find where all their where it really began, where the seed was laid, that the behavior was extreme and that it's affecting them negatively now.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
Because all the behaviors have purpose, and they're providing something positive. And then, if we're looking at something else, like I have two students that are potentially brilliant, and you've spoken to one of them before. They have no idea who they are yet, but I can see the potential in both of them. And I have other students that are just starting, but you want to be able to find resource and resource states. So physiological and emotional states that work for them.
Right.
And also step-by-step processes that when you model it and you can spin it, you can actually reapply it to things that they're doing into the future and then build off of that. It's actually a fascinating process. I would never want to do anything else. I mean, I love being here with you, but honestly, dealing with each person individually and in groups, there's nothing better. You learn so much.
Oh, you do. I'm
You
sure.
learn so much from people.
So let me ask you real quick: is there such thing as group hypnosis or a group counsel where you're all together, doing exactly what we're doing collectively and talking about their lives in order to get the answers they're seeking, or is that permissible?
We run seminars that have certain themes. And
Right.
the themes that we find in the seminars are, as we said, we have the sales seminar coming up, and it's actually just interpersonal communication. So it's not all salespeople that are in it, because you're in sales no matter who you are. Right?
Yeah, I totally agree.
So knowing what's
We're all
happening in front of
salespeople.
you, making at least starting to begin to be able to build the ability to read people and know what's happening outside of yourself.
Right.
Communicate with them and providing what they need. Right. That's the key. So yes, in the seminar setting, I think seminars are a different kind of powerful because the people actually feed off of each other.
Oh,
And
big
there's-
time.
Every 18 minutes, I have them up and moving around. 15 to 18 minutes, there's no stagnant time. I mean, we take breaks and we work into the night sometimes when we go to dinner together.
Right.
But everybody's got a desire. And even if they just think they have a need, they definitely do. And it can be defined with some leadership and just a few questions that are general. They can actually dig down what they want to close off and the things they want to release. And in the bigger sense, the goals that they have.
Right.
So we reverse engineer a lot of goals. So we start out at the last moment, you have something, and then build each step backwards into where you are now. And you can even compare now where you feel and what you feel you're doing with who that person is when you get to that goal. And remember, there's no finish line. So there's no end of goals. Like everybody has an eternal amount of goals that they have possibly inside of them.
but again, you want to reach some type of goal line, like quit smoking or losing 50 pounds or 14 inches, whatever. So are you saying, like my mom was in therapy, and she's 94 right now, God bless her, but she was in therapy and she stayed in therapy for most of her life, above and beyond all the problems that she had growing up and so forth. So is it like that where you could be healed but you still continue?
So we're not going to say the word healed because I can't. So
Right. No, I understand.
It's definitely not therapy. I think that therapy is just. I think there's some good therapists out there that care about people. I think therapy is, for the most part, just somebody who's getting paid to be your friend. I know somebody close to me who spent probably hundreds of thousands of dollars.
It doesn't
It's an
surprise me.
insurance policy.
Yeah, right.
And
right.
and remember,
Right.
look at the difference in goal here. So, what you're looking at is us moving from step to step. So you have one thing you want to change. You feel it first, and then you exercise it, and you feel differently, and your behaviors follow. It becomes simpler and simpler, and then there's something else you want to accomplish, and something else you want to apply to. So there's no end. But it seems like to me, and I don't know the industry that well, but with therapists, it seems like they want to keep you in a certain state for as long as they can, so they
Right.
can keep collecting money.
Exactly.
That's not how we work in
again,
any way.
Yeah, no, and it's a lot of money, and it doesn't surprise me that someone spent that amount of money, because once you get into, I think people just need to vent, to talk to someone, and obviously they got to find that right person. But I'm unsure whether or not it works entirely, because I know a lot of people have gone through therapy and they haven't gotten any better.
So remember that too.
Yeah.
There's two things that happen when people want to vent, and I cut people off a lot when they speak at the clinic. Right. A lot of times I'm trying to interrupt what they're going through emotionally, and the words and the thoughts are attached to the emotion they're going through. I'll just stop it very quickly.
Right.
Right. Other times people go through. That's one thing that happens. Other times, if people are self-aware, they'll start speaking about what they're thinking.
Yeah.
And they'll say it out loud and be like, "Oh, I didn't mean it."
Yeah, right.
It wasn't real.
Yeah, no.
So you have both of those things happening, and the only thing that can get in the way if you think that your words are justified or that they're more important than the change you want to go through. I'm thinking of somebody in particular right now. So yeah, that's how it works. So that I wanted to talk about what happens in the mind when approached by authority down the road, the thought process, the learning. Right? The ability to follow instructions into a perceived goal, and everybody needs to follow instructions. There's this one this one segment that I cite constantly from the Jimmy Kimmel Show before all the craziness, right?
Yeah,
before 2016, everything went wild.
Right. The benchmark.
Back when people were actually entertaining on TV.
Right. Sure.
So he did this skit in, I think it was in Silver Lake, which is a really popular area to live for young people in Los Angeles. And he took Marco Batali, right, the chef,
Right.
the big red-haired guy, and they just went and walked down the street, and they met somebody, and they said, "Hey, how would you like us to go take the camera crew and go to your kitchen and cook lunch for you?"
That's awesome.
And the guy was like, "Yeah, let's do it." I think he was like a Swede. I think he was a Swedish immigrant. And so they actually went to the grocery store,
Picked
and
out the
Marco
items.
picked out everything he wanted to cook,
Right.
and brought it into the guy's house. And then they met a girl, and they said, "Oh, you're going to come with us too, because this
Wow.
guy needs a date."
This is
right?
entertainment. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is fun because they did this in the middle of the day in Los Angeles when
Sure.
nobody was suspecting it, and then
Right.
of course they aired it at night during the show.
Yeah, sure.
So then it became relevant, and then so Marco asked the guy to start frying up some onions or something, and the guy does it a certain way. It's just a bit different.
Yeah.
And Marco's just watching like what starts asking him like, okay, so first you did that, and then you did this, and why'd you do that?
Right.
And Jimmy's like, are you honestly asking this guy for advice? You're like the biggest chefs in the world. He's
Right.
like, listen,
Right.
a chef that
Right.
doesn't know how to learn from people
Right.
is not a chef at all.
I think that's the best thing I've ever heard. I've heard today. That's for sure. I'm so.
That's true.
It makes so much sense that you never stop learning at all.
So you can pick things up when you model people,
Yes.
and everybouse got success they don't even realize they've
Yeah,
got, right?
right,
And
right.
as long as you can apply it, you become more flexible, your behaviors become more success oriented, they become streamlined, they become simpler, right? It's very easy when you're motivated to do it. It's very easy for you to be able to kick the problems you had as your mind developed, kick the problems from childhood and adolescence when you had a million things flying at you at once, and decide to follow one plan, right? Even in the Bible, they talk about you can only answer to one master, right? And that seems a little dramatic, but it's true. When you have one authority and follow it, you're going to find that it leads you into exactly what you want.
We've been talking here on the Get Real podcast with Josh Kearney from Alternative Hypnosis, North Country Hypnosis, and your new clinic out in Kansas City. You're a big fan, obviously, of the man himself. That's Scott McFall, who was in last episode. And, just talking about, again, just to let people know, I didn't know we would be speaking on, with reference to, respect rather, to the iconic Kardashian family. But that was a big part of our discussion today.
That was awesome.
But again, that was just as a contemporary example, I guess an extreme example of where we are today. Is that correct, Josh? I just want to clarify that.
And it's actually a map for exactly what has happened in general. It's not everybody, but as a general consensus and acceptance in America, what has happened to the American family. And no matter who bills it, I don't care if it's somebody on The View or somebody on CNN or even Fox or anything else.
Right.
The mother and the father are both important, and they're important for different reasons.
Right.
But you've got to have both if you want a sustained ability to learn, feel, accept, forgive, be empathetic. And of course, those things can be learned later, but it makes things much easier for your kids or children or people in your charge to be developed, to develop into who they could be.
Well, that will conclude today's show. Obviously, all the information is going to be posted on this, so to get in contact with you right at the outset and at the end. And again, thanks once again, Josh, for being on your very own Get Real podcast.
Excellent. So we had an excellent time today, Glenn. That was
Yes,
an
we did.
excellent job. You can reach Glenn Curry at 315-783-7903. You can reach me at 315-432-1514. You can reach Power and Light Hypnosis at area code 816-357-8778. Director at destinyhypnosis.com. And Donovan, if you're listening, please don't call my cell phone ever again.
Someone was just calling you on his cell phone. For everyone here from the H2O Studios and this edition of a Get Real podcast with Glenn Curry and Josh Kearney, you have a good day. And we'll take one good last look at Public Square on Tuesday, April 27th, 2021. Everyone, you have a great day.
Outro music.